Well, welcome everybody. Um, I'm Riyad Bahour. For those who don't know me, I'm coordinator for the Global Studies Program at Sac City College. And I'm happy to welcome you to the Global Innovators Fellowship report back. And very happy also that we're doing this at the SESI Professional Learning Collective's regular meeting. I've felt for a while that there's a kind of affinity and relationship between Global Innovators Fellowship, SESI PLC, Teachers for Equity, and all of these groups. And it seems like it's time to start sort of collecting each other and collecting ourselves into one larger collective. So thank you, SESI, for having us here. We wanted to just give you an idea of where we're at in our quest to add more of a global context to our existing curriculum, and also why we're doing it. And the idea first came about to have a group like this as we thought about the pandemic, right, and the global nature of the pandemic, which ironically did two things. One, it kind of stressed for us the interconnectivity of everybody and everything, right, every object, even on the planet, as well as made us all kind of isolated, right, and separated from each other. And so 2 years into this, we wanted to kind of motivate ourselves, motivate faculty to help our students make those connections, to reconnect to not only our local community, but to our global community too, through knowledge and global context. And also we underscore the connection between social justice in our local communities and social justice globally. And often the two are intimately connected, right? And that what we're able to tolerate locally ends up being what we're able to tolerate and allow to happen globally, and vice versa. We can't really kind of escape that connection. And so we've each thought a little bit about what are the classes we teach, or what role do we play in the case of the librarians, some of whom teach, some thinking about this kind of in terms of a broader relationship to the college and to being educators. And how can we add a global dimension? Some of the projects are philosophical and tangible at the same time. Some are kind of very focused, right, to add just a really direct global component. And so, for example, I wanted to tell you about something I'm doing new in my class, and Jessica, who'll speak right after me, is also doing it in her class, called COIL, Collaborative Online International Learning, which is a virtual exchange working with another instructor and another set of students in another country. Right? It just so happens Jessica and I are both working with Chileans, different cities though, in Chile, different universities. But in my collaboration, my collaborating instructor teaches ESL to students who are studying adventure tourism, right? And so there's immediately sort of a connection with California, right? In terms of whitewater rafting, skiing, hang gliding, and all of those things. And so initially, I didn't think that my global studies students would be able to pair with anything other than like another global studies class. But when we started talking, we realized, well, she wants her students to learn English, and particularly to learn some vocabulary connected to tourism. And as I thought about it, I was like, well, couldn't her students be sort of like tour guides for my students to learn about Chile? And there's a lot going on in Chile, politically, socially, culturally these days. A lot of dramatic events, from a new, very young president to the rewriting of the constitution after a protracted grassroots civil protest movement. And so she said, yeah, that's great, let's do that. So we ended up constructing the collaboration using Flipgrid, the app that allows you to set topics and then the students to record videos. So the first collaboration topic was just introduce yourself, some of the things that you want your counterparts to know about you, and like an interesting fact, kind of like an icebreaker. And then the second collaboration had two different prompts. For the US students, she wanted she wanted my students to make a short video about any aspect of adventure tourism or sports that they're engaged with, or a cultural or historical topic related to either Sacramento or any other city that they've lived in, right? So it's kind of a broader, and how I frame that for my global studies students is that it's really important to think about not only how we perceive people in other parts of the world, but how we're perceived and what we choose to present in terms of a global audience, right? And that'll sort of be what we reflect on. Why did you choose that? How did you present that? What did you feel like when you were representing? Were you representing Sacramento yourself, or did you feel like somehow you're representing a national identity as well? And so we'll get into that sort of nitty-gritty of dismantling the whole nationalist narrative and that sort of thing. And so for my students, I wanted them to learn about what's happening in Chile. So the topics we gave the Chilean students are to choose from included, can you talk about a situation of inequity or oppression in Chile and what is being done to address it? Can you talk about current political developments and what you'd like to see come out of the current movements, right, in terms of the new constitution, et cetera? And there were 5 questions total along those lines. And one of them was, what are your dreams for the future? Because I think that question also is a question that can also trigger you thinking about what are your horizons? What are the possibilities for you? And that could be kind of a rich source of reflection for our students here, like as we talk about that. So that, just to give you an idea of the collaboration, I didn't share a screen or anything because I wanted to make sure to get to everybody else, and because I literally have like 200 windows open after running this thing all day and I didn't want anything to crash. But so that's kind of a basic introduction and an example of my collaboration. And then I'll hand it over to Jessica to talk about hers. And if folks do have questions as we're talking, you can kind of pop them into the chat. Otherwise, we can kind of save them all for the end. Jessica.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. My name is Jessica Coppola, and I teach nutrition and food science at Sacramento City College. I have to warn you, my internet connection is very frequently unstable. So if I have to turn off my camera or something, I'll do my best. So when Riyadh initially put this fellowship idea out there, I was really excited because I teach about food, right? And everybody alive eats, and no matter where you are in the globe, you have different things you eat and patterns to your eating. And so through the COIL collaborative that he mentioned, I met a woman named Susana, also from Chile. And she and I started talking. We're both moms, we're both wives, we both work full time. So we were really worried about time constraints. So we decided to do a pretty simple type of interaction. Our first idea was, oh, maybe we'll create a survey about eating and food and patterns, and we'll just have everybody take it, and then we'll compare your students to my students. We thought that sounds good. But then as we started talking more and creating the survey, we realized, well, what do they want to know about each other? Wouldn't that be more fun than us creating the survey? So then we reworked it, and we gave our classes the same assignment, and that was to create a Google survey for one another. So the Sac City students created it for Susana's students and vice versa. And we gave them a model to look at. We said, you know, here's a Google survey. Here's how to use it. It's pretty user-friendly if you've ever used it before. Here's how you visually see the results once people take your survey. So we gave them a model, and then we asked them to go for it. No, rewind. Hold on, let me screen share. I'll show you. So first we started with an introduction, and then we did a getting to know each other Padlet. That's how we started. And they introduced each other in whatever manner they wanted. We didn't put any rules there. This was probably my favorite part of the whole project, actually. they connected on Instagram. They, I don't know, some of them made romantic connections. It was pretty hilarious. But then this is the sample that we gave them. So we gave them a sample of a Google survey saying, oh, you might want to ask something like this, but it could be whatever you want it to be. And so these are some of the results of Susanna's students taking my student survey. So my students wanted to ask them, what obstacles do you face in making healthier diet choices? And you can see that their results were kind of all over the place, but I don't have enough time to cook. Healthy foods are too expensive, just easier to get fast food. Anyway, as we went through the project, what my students really came away with was, wow, we're a lot more similar than we are different. And that was pretty powerful. The Chilean students, Susanna tells me, had a perception that all Americans live on burgers and Coca-Cola. They're all morbidly obese. They're all inactive. They do no exercise. Like, they had these really kind of negative perceptions. And my students all felt like everyone in Chile eats like a saint, grows all their own vegetables, exercises all the time. And I mean, I'm generalizing, not everybody felt that way, but those were kind of the trends. And when we got the results back of both sets of surveys, they found, we could all maybe be a little healthier. And so they were much more similar than they were different. So that was kind of the gist of it. We did it in the context of discussion board posts. That's where I had them report back. Yes, I participated in creating a survey. Here were some of my takeaways. And the final phase of this project is to report back on what were the big findings, what were the big similarities, differences, what did you come away with, what were your favorite parts, things like that. So that was kind of it in a nutshell.
Awesome. Thanks, Jessica. Actually, Jessica, you reminded me by talking about survey that one of the indirect benefits of mine was my partner, Lily, asked me, were there any students in my class that spoke Spanish? Because she wanted to put her weakest students in groups where there was a US Spanish speaker. So I got to do a survey of my students. Do you understand Spanish, and at what level? And I really felt like the Spanish speaking students for once felt, or rarely felt validated and felt really happy to be able to say, I speak and understand Spanish perfectly. I'm at an 8 or I'm at a 10, et cetera, right? So that was kind of unexpected, and we'll probably be sorting out some more unexpected benefits as we go on. Thanks, Jessica, so much.
Thank you.
And Mark, you're next.
Yeah, hi everyone. So my name is Mark Dennis, and I teach psychology at SCC. So I'm actually going to tell you, so I want to start off by telling you, actually half my class is here. I'm just noticing that half my 4 o'clock class is in here. So that's pretty cool. But so I want to tell you kind of the project that I started out with, and then kind of the transformation that happened while I was in this process. So I teach a number of classes. One of the classes that I teach is Psych 367, which is a class called Psychology of Minorities, which I really enjoy teaching. I'm not crazy about the name, but really what we talk about in that class is we talk about oppression, so we talk about what oppression looks like from what is the psychology of oppression from the lens of the oppressor, but also what is the psychology of oppression from the lens of the oppressed. And then we also talk about how you resist oppression, and we also talk about how you build the resilience necessary to resist oppression. So that's kind of what we talk about. The problem that I've been having with that class, so this is a psychology class, right? And so, if you think about psychology is obviously the study of human behavior, and trying to make sense of human beings and how they think and how they feel and how they behave. This is obviously, people have been trying to do that as long as people have been people, but the formal discipline of psychology is a pretty new discipline. Like, most people attribute the first psychological study to about 1830, somewhere like that. And so if you think about modern psychology as a discipline, it really is a discipline that's sort of came about during the colonial era. And that mentality is all over the discipline in so many different ways. And so the problem, the the issue that I was having was, here I am teaching this class on oppression and what that looks like and resistance to oppression, to a large extent through this discipline that was created by an oppressor, right? So it's problematic. And I've always struggled in that class to find the right textbooks and all of that kind of stuff. And so initially, this project was pretty narrowly focused on trying to find a textbook that was a little bit more anti-colonial than the textbooks, and not even necessarily a textbook, but find readings, possibly even putting together a reader, possibly even, I didn't think I would write a textbook in a year, but possibly even creating some sort of textbook so that there was so that the readings were consistent with the philosophy of the class, if you will, right? So that's what I was planning to do. Now, I want to say a little bit about why I chose this particular project, because I think this is really important. So when I first started teaching, I had this mentor. I had a couple of different mentors, but I had this one mentor. And he said to me, he said, Mark, your best years as a teacher are going to be years 3 through 10. Right. So your third year through your 10th year of teaching. And apparently this is based on research. I've never seen the research, but I trust him. So I'm assuming there are some studies that confirm that. Right. So he said it takes you about 3 years to figure out what the hell you're doing. Right. And then after about 10 years or so, most people start to burn out. So you're going to be on fire from years 3 through years 10. And I heard that at the time. I was so excited about teaching and I really thought that I had found my true calling. So it's kind of like, yeah, whatever's in one year, out the other. So I started teaching in 2010, right? So fast forward to 2020. It literally felt for me like someone it didn't feel like this gradual thing. It literally felt like someone just kind of flipped a switch. And all of a sudden, this thing that I love to do and was so passionate about started to feel like a chore. It started to feel like work, like so much of the passion just seemed to kind of like dissipate. Now, obviously, this was 2020. A lot of stuff happened in 2020, right? So it was my 10th year anniversary as a teacher, but it was also the start of COVID and so many different things. So I was trying to kind of find a way to kind of reignite my passion for teaching so first of all, thinking about how to make the text in this class more appropriate. And then I was also familiar with Frantz Fanon, who is a psychiatrist actually, who wrote Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and not Pedagogy of the Oppressed, Wretched of the Earth. And in this book, he sort of talks about, he talks about oppressed and oppressor and those two different psychologies. And ultimately, he says that the only way to get out of this mentality is basically for oppressed people to rise up and actually kind of violently in terms of how he describes it in this book. But he talks about oppressed people kind of taking over nation states and then nation states kind of dissipating, right? As oppressed people around the world start to realize their commonality. And I also kind of wanted to bring some of that into it, which is why this program seems so appropriate. So I started down this path, and it's hard to talk about all of the things that happen. Would just take too much time. But I truly believe that when you authentically ask a question, the right teachers, the right mentors, the right books, the right quotes, the right whatever will present themselves to you. And so as I started on this journey, kind of with this very specific focus about this project, I figured out something about why my passion for teaching had started to dissipate. So when I first started teaching, it was all about my teaching was an expression of my activism. Like I literally saw teaching as a form of activism. And then over the years, and I think this is very common of a lot of activists, you get tired, you become more pessimistic, not great things happen, right? And things that you push really hard for, you see them falling apart. And over time, you get jaded. I shouldn't say you, I should personalize it. Over time, I started to get jaded. And I think a lot of that kind of activism, social justice piece to my teaching kind of dissipated. And to the extent that it was there, it was kind of in words, but not necessarily in passion or in spirit. And in the process of kind of thinking about bringing text into this course that were appropriate, what I realized was missing, it wasn't about this narrow focus on text. What I realized was missing was that passion that I initially started with. And so the thing that has kind of occurred to me specifically about that class, but kind of just about teaching in general, and a lot of the critical race theorists talk about this, but sort of this like triad between sort of research and reflection and theory and practice, and then having that practice inform the next round of research and reflection and the next theory and the next practice, and so on and so on and so on. And so the new goal, I guess, for this project is to think about how to bring that into particularly this class, right? So that triad of theory and practice and research and reflection and back to theory. How do I bring that in a concrete way into this class, right? And also thinking about that within the context, one of the things that happened that was just kind of just sort of one of the things that just sort of fell across my desk is I read, someone sent me this article, I think it was in The Guardian, and it was called, I think it was called The End of Nation States. I think that was the name of the article, but it's a really informative article, and it sort of talked about the fact that, and I had never really thought about this, it makes sense, but the fact that the nation state, the idea of a nation state is a relatively new thing. If you think about the entirety of human existence, it's a relatively new thing. And they were basically making the argument that nation states had sort of outgrown their practical utility and would eventually go away. And what does this post-nation state world look like? And so now what I'm trying to think about in terms of this class is, how do I create that triad within the context of activism within a local community, but also within the context of activism that's more global? And so I kind of am walking away from this project with more questions than I started with. So it didn't really get more concrete and focused, it actually got broader. But I think it got broader in the way that it needed to get broader. And so I did sign up for the COIL workshop, and I'm really excited about doing that. I'm gonna be doing that in June. And I'm hoping this principle of just kind of kismet will continue, and that I will find the right person to collaborate with who comes from that same mindset, who can be a mentor or a discoverer or explorer. But that's really, that's sort of how the project is transformed from this narrow focus of let's find the right text to this much broader focus of let's bring social justice back into this picture in a I wouldn't say a really concrete way, but with at least a guide as to how to do that. So yeah, so that's where I am, and yeah, I guess I'll keep you
Love
posted.
that. I love that shift, and thank you for like walking us through the process and where you got to, because I think that's really kind of philosophically
Yeah.
inspirational, actually.
Oh, well, good.
A
Yeah.
lot of us get to that switch.
Yeah.
Called it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
And I think it's important to just normalize it too, you know, because I think a lot of us are feeling that way, but afraid to say it. So
Definitely. Thank you, Mark. Thanks. I think Antonio is next. And
Yeah.
there's only 4 more people to our audience, so then we can kind of dive into more discussion.
Yeah, thank you. And I think I'll be fairly brief. I do want to start off, however. So I'm Antonio Lopez. Hi, everybody. I am a librarian at Sacramento City College. And I want to start off just by thanking you, Mark, for being so honest and for really, you know, showing, revealing that struggle, right? I think that for a lot of us who are activists and who use our profession as a vehicle for activism, when we get tired or when we get disenchanted, it's very easy to go into a kind of like a professional identity crisis, right? And I experienced that during the pandemic, especially because thinking about being a librarian is the library as place, as space, is so much a part of being a librarian. I became a librarian because I love libraries. I want to be in libraries. And to not be in the library was very challenging for me to understand my role and my identity as a librarian. And I'm starting to feel the kindling spark up, right? And to get back into that. And I'm really looking forward to see where this is going. And this has helped me as well. I'm going to, so thank you, Mark. That was really, I mean, that helped me to put my thoughts in place as well. I'm going to share my screen. From the Sacramento City College Library webpage, we have a research guides. And going into the research guides for this spring, you'll see there's one that's called Nutrition and Culture in Chile and California, Nutrición y Cultura Chilena y Californiana. And I created this research guide to support Jess's class, which she just described for us. And, you know, this was kind of an experiment for us, right? This was an attempt to fulfill a role as a support service through librarianship to help students be able to see each other across you know, borders, which don't really exist when you're online. You know, there are challenges, there are obstacles to being online, which are as local as they are international, right? So here we're talking about, you know, the quality of your internet connection. If you live with a lot of people who are competing for broadband or even competing to use the same devices, right? Who's got the device with the most recently updated operating system, right? That's the one you want to be on. And so that can happen here, that can happen in Chile, that can happen in anywhere in the world, right? So it really, you know, in a way, this becomes a trans-border space, right? An international space for us. So we kind of just laid it out in terms of there's a welcome page, and then there's, because it's a nutrition class, there's a page about food and culture in Chile, right? Which points to Chile, which very interestingly is a long Pacific coast nation, right? North to south. And, you know, we connect here to things like ebooks that are available through the Sacramento City College Library, which our students in the United States are able to access. Oh, I'm sorry, this one was an ebook. That one was a physical book. Sorry, let me show you an ebook. So going into an ebook where you can connect directly into the book, and you can, you know, read about the topic. So this is a way to connect our students to their host nation through our library resources, and at the same time sort of scaffold their experience as college students with library resources. And here, you know, we can, let's see, we could say, we could search for specific words. So here we can talk about the preparation of food. Sorry, go back to this. And we can actually look at the page and read a specific page that's talking about the preparation of food, and in Chile by the Mapuche people. We can see a variety of different resources available to our students. Now, on the other hand, we have food and culture in California. And the food and culture in California page is a little bit different because our counterpart students who are in Chile, they are not going to be able to access our library resources, which are based on a license to our students, right? So in this particular case, I found, you know, just, you know, videos, other things that are related directly to California. And so basically, just trying to create a little way to bridge the gap and also to bring students into the library. So I had the ambition of doing more of these. I started to work with Riyadh on his course. I had some bumps in the road and obstacles in my personal life and work life this semester, which made it a little difficult for me to fully fulfill my ambitions and to make good on my goals. And so I wasn't able to do everything I wanted to do, but we started to map it out. And this is the first time we're trying this. It's not perfect, but I'm looking forward to opportunities in the future to work with the Global Instruction Fellowship or with the COIL faculty who are doing these kind of international collaborations. Internationally, we're all people on planet Earth, right? We're space people because Earth is traveling through space, and hey, we're all here together. So let's do this together and let's make the library part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio. I love that. I'm going to take away we're all space people, among other things. Rosalinda, your mic is muted still.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rosalinda Salazar. I'm adjunct faculty in the English department at Sac City College. And my project, I chose to do my project on my English 300 course, which is college composition, essentially an introduction course to writing in college. So I want to share a few things with you via the screen. So if you would just hold on for a minute. Okay, so I wrote a few things out for today, which was useful, just helpful for me to think, more intently about the project. So my Global Innovators Fellowship project title is Stirring the Pot, Rethinking and Remixing College Composition with a Globalized Anti-Racist Sensibility. My justification for stirring the pot is that it will suggest that studying, reading about, researching, and writing about food are authentic means to know oneself. And in the case of the global project, in knowing the world. So in this way, my goal for stirring the pot is to rely on food's universality and commonality, as Jessica spoke earlier, to ultimately recognize and respect every student's real lived experience, cultural background, current bank of knowledge, and quote unquote, already authorial voice. So my overall ambition was to make the course, to redesign the course, and as an overall mantra, to make it accessible both in its design and in its content. So it would be accessible to a student's skill, wherever that skill is, whatever that skill level is, and importantly, accessible to that student's cultural, social, economical background. So in thinking about the project, of course, I had to think, well, how am I going to go about, right? How am I going to go about achieving this goal of recognizing, respecting every student's background? So as I mentioned, accessibility, I decided would be the guiding factor. And my thought is that any course redesign must be accessible to the student's skill level and their whole human ecology, cultural, social, economical. Therefore, I decided that the course must include, and this was from my perspective, right, given my own history and my own history as an educator, I decided that the components for this to meet the accessibility would have to be a focus on community and community building. There would have to be student and faculty risk-taking. And then sensible, effective, constant, and continual scaffolding to, of course, to increase and maintain the accessibility. So I had hoped at the beginning of the project to work with a writing instructor in another country, and I had specifically hoped that country would be Mexico, but that never materialized for different reasons. But I didn't let that stop the project. Instead, I thought, well, what would be another way? What would be another way that students could be in touch with their own backgrounds and also have access to other cultures, other countries? So I decided that one of the major assignments for the course would be for the students to write personal food narratives. I'll just read you a little bit of what I've come up with here. So nonetheless, my students learned much from writing their personal food narratives. I would say, and definitely my students would affirm, that writing their personal food narratives helped them recognize and practice their already voice. So essentially I used I used food as a way for the students to discover their writing voice. They wrote their narratives as a group, which was awesome, during class, and shared them out at various stages with each other. These particular class sessions clearly evidence that the students came to reason that there is power, wonder, wisdom, and freedom in honoring many stories, disrupting the danger of a single story. Many of you may be familiar with Adichie's work, Danger of a Single Story. In addition, this particular writing assignment, Personal Food Narratives, globalized my students' awareness and appreciation of other countries, as some of my students' stories took root, developed, and are yet unfolding in other countries other than the United States, including Mexico, Vietnam, Trinidad and Tobago, and the Republic of Cameroon. The personal food narrative assignment enthusiastically culminated in an all-class meeting, an all-class reading off campus at a local coffee shop. It was a really incredible afternoon. The students proudly shared their narratives. You could tell they genuinely enjoyed reading and they genuinely enjoyed hearing the stories of their classmates. The personal food narrative assignment was one content piece in my course module, using food to find my writer's voice. And if I may, I would like to show you an example of one of the personal food narratives that was written. I have the students' permission to share it, and I think it is a good example. It's a fine example. It's an excellent example of the way the personal food narrative allowed each student to touch home. So to touch base with their own personal background, but yet to extend their awareness more globally. I'm going to share one. And certainly you can read along. I'm going to go ahead and read it to you. And just a footnote, I've so enjoyed all of the students in this class. This young woman has much to say.
Rosalinda, are you meaning to show us different pages, or are you, because,
It's one, no, it's one page.
oh, okay, okay.
And if we're short on time, I don't think it's necessary to show it.
Oh, no, you can show it. We just only see the same page you started with, so I wanted to make sure we're seeing what you want us to see on the shared screen.
Oh, I see. Okay, hold on. Hold on. All right, can you see that?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah, okay,
Yep.
all right. Thank you for the heads up, Riyadh. All right, so this is one student's essay, not the entire thing. I just chose a couple of paragraphs from it. But I think it's a beautiful read. Even though I am Jewish, my family is secular. The idea of God was somewhat of a joke when I was growing up, but we were still proud of our culture and always had big family gatherings on Jewish holidays. Hanukkah and Passover were our favorite ones to celebrate. Hanukkah is observed for 8 nights, commemorating the recovery of Jerusalem, and Passover is observed for only one night and celebrates the liberation of the slaves from Egypt. My family and I will typically only celebrate the first and last night of Hanukkah because we're non-traditional, and 8 nights is a long time to us. We were happy to see one another, but the main thing we were excited about was for the celebratory meal. My father and grandmother did most of the cooking during the holidays. However, growing up, my father didn't cook much, and not much has changed since childhood. He's a busy man who spends most of his time in his office selling gold and silver coins. My mom and grandmother, when she was still alive and well, would usually prepare the everyday meals. And when it was my dad's turn to cook, we would just go out. But there was something about the holidays that brought out the Rosh, and excuse my pronunciation, the Jewish spirit in him and in all of us. And then she concludes by saying, as I said before, even though we weren't a religious family, we bonded with each other through food and our oral traditions. My family always made it a point to remind me that just because we may not pray every day or participate in the religious aspect of our culture, we are still very much Jewish, because Judaism is a culture more than anything else. To this day, latkes, and she mostly wrote about latkes, the preparation, how their family consumes them. To this day, latkes are still one of my favorite dishes, not only because of their delicious flavor and texture, but they remind me of wonderful moments in my childhood. The food itself is always enjoyable, but the most satisfying aspect of the meal is the feeling of togetherness and manifesting this connection to our culture through food.
Thank you, Rosalinda.
You're welcome.
Okay, great. I love that project, and we'll just to make sure we have time for discussion, let's hear our last 2 presenters, and then it'll leave us with 15 minutes for some discussion. Xiaoli.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Xiaoli Li. I'm adjunct professor at Sac City College. The class, I teach 2 classes. One is for called cataloging, and the other one is more technical services. I know for those of you probably never worked in library, it's probably difficult for you to understand what cataloging class does. So what I'm going to do is quickly show you, share my screen. Where did it go? Okay. So for the cataloging class, what we do is you as a library user, when you search a library catalog, you read this, you say, oh, okay, this is a book. This is the title of the book. And then here tells you where the book is located. And then you say, oh, let me read a little bit more. It gives you more information about the book. But what we do behind the scene is create a very structured, sort of like a data we call record, which look like this. and support the display and the discovery like this. So this is called the cataloging record. In my class, basically students learn how to create a record like this. So by creating record require a lot of knowledge. First of all, you need to know those structure. And the second of all, you need to know, okay, how do I assign a subject headings, a subject terms to this particular item, and what descriptions should I provide? So it's a lot of intellectual thinking behind, in addition just describing the book title and the author and the year. So traditionally, library practice is using Library of Congress subject heading and using Library of Congress subject headings as well as a classification number. So recently, I did more research on how those type of practice actually doesn't fully representing sort of marginalize the groups or events or the places or the name and so on. So as a result, when I see this great opportunity, I thought, oh, what I'm going to do is introduce my student to the cataloging practices used by other countries, especially some sort of practice were relevant to us living in the United States. For example, how Canada library create subject terms are more appropriate for the First Nations people. So for example, use the native name as a name instead of Europeanized name. And then the other example is the libraries in New Zealand, how they incorporate their indigenous group languages, names, and the terms into their practices. So all of those I thought will help students really think when they're doing this work, they need to think about more like globalization and decolonization and be inclusive. And only with that type of thinking, they can create this cataloging record representing those groups in a more sort of like objective way instead of European-centric way. So how I do this in my class, since this is the first time I did this, what I have been doing is I identify some articles as well as presentations related to topics like this and introduce them into my classes and put them as a discussing topic. So students read the article and watch those presentations and then post the thoughts based on some questions I posted to them. So far it has been generated a lot of sort of group learning, and sometimes the even debate what is the word means. Can we use indigenous or should we use other terms? So it's interesting, not necessarily related to cataloging, but more like language-wise, what is considered more inclusive instead of what you think is the right way to do it. So I feel this is a great way to introduce some different thinking to students. One of the area I like to do more in the future is to probably find other instructors who are doing similar class. So we can have even, especially if those are in other country, then they can really learn from the native way as well. And then if that's not possible, I've been thinking about, I would invite some experts in those particular area, be the guest speaker or guest lecturer for my classes. So that's my future plan. And I have to say, this project has made me feel like even myself is become a much better cataloger. When I look at my practice, I feel like this has been very beneficial. by the way, I work full-time at UC Davis. I'm head of the technical services department. Basically, my department is responsible for creating cataloging records to support discovery for entire UC Davis community. And I also using some of what I've been doing for this class and share with my staff. So it's more than just the classes. So I feel one project benefit two organizations. Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you, Shaoli. Your project gets at the heart of kind of classification and categorization, right? You
Yes.
imagine students from marginalized backgrounds wanting to do, quote unquote, wanting to do research on their own communities, having to translate the categories into the language of the dominant culture in order to find information about their own communities. So kind of shaking that up is a really important project. Thank you. And last but not least, Halsey. I think we have 4 SESI. Half of our global innovators are in SESI, and Halsey's the Halsey, you're one of them. We have one who couldn't make it today, Nana. But Halsey, you'll be our last presenter, and then we can kind of open it up to a more open discussion.
Cool, thank you, Riyadh. My name's Halsey, and I teach in the Mathematics and Statistics Department at Sac City. And I wanted to kind of infuse the global perspective and lens into math. I think it's so important to go beyond what we have traditionally done in mathematics and expand it. And part of that is just growing up in Northern Canada, the perspective that I would get in the news was very international. And I found that when I moved into the United States, into Ohio, it became more kind of myopic and isolated, I guess. And it was mostly local and national news. So that also played true in the textbooks that I had for statistics that I'd be given to preview or to use for courses. The examples in there were just, very US centric, I guess. So part of the kind of motivation to go into this program was to just get out of that paradigm. So I decided a couple courses to start to infuse global perspective and lens, and one of them is a Math 300 class. That's a general kind of a mathematical ideas class. And one thing that we did is we created a timeline of mathematics from a kind of, each student would choose some sort of a culture, or they would choose some area or era. And so we created a great fabric, a great kind of picture of the historical timeline of mathematics from all of these individual perspectives that touched upon different countries, different cultures. It was a really great experience. And what was great about it also was that it can live on. And so this could be shared with the next class, and they can add to it. So over time, we can create this awesome timeline for students to learn from and to add to. The other class I wanted to go into more in terms of global data with statistics, because data is global. So one idea was around COVID is that we had the class begin to go out and look for the COVID vaccination rates in different countries. So each student would go and get 2 or 3 countries, and they'd discover what their COVID vaccination rates were. And then they would go with those same countries, and they would get their GDP, their gross domestic product, or other financial indicators. And the goal there was to start to tie vaccination rates with kind of the general wealth of the country, international wealth of the country, just to start to highlight some of the incongruencies that there are globally with COVID vaccine distribution and vaccination rates. And what we were able to do after that is have a really kind of deep discussion about, well, what can we add to this in terms of this? We have this global database that we've formed as a class. How can we add to that? And so we've started to add some other metrics into that database that we can expand upon in the future and also grow. So those were, I'm gonna move. Excuse the background noise. And so those are the kind of the couple of the items, and I think there's so many other opportunities for data and a global perspective.
Thanks, Halsey. In one of the other earlier sessions today, somebody made the comment like, well, you can deal with gender and sexuality in a lot of different disciplines. I mean, I don't know how a mathematician would, maybe not in math. And I thought of you right away because you can actually do math with anything, right? You can, when it comes to global issues, I think a lot of the mythology around erasing power dynamics sometimes can be corrected through math, right? When Americans tend to, we have this discourse of, well, there's always two sides to the story. Well, let's look at the math. If we're looking at the Mapuche community in Chile, let's look at the number of Mapuches who've been killed by the government versus the number of people the Mapuche killed. Let's look at the number of hectares confiscated of land. Let's look at water, right? And just kind of look at the stats to realize it's not really about a difference of perspectives, it's a difference of power that allows, one party to confiscate and kill, et cetera, et cetera. So I think math is really the key in a lot of cases to kind of a broader understanding or a more accurate understanding, let's say, right, of a lot of global dynamics. So we're excited that we were able to kind of present these ideas to the SESI professional learning community and also to the students that are here. And we're really happy that you're able to join us and hear some of the ways that we're globalizing our content in our curriculum. And we want to hear if you have any feedback for us, any responses or aha moments or questions, if you want to know anything more about these approaches or ideas. Because like some of us said, they're not necessarily finished, right? They're kind of open in our minds and also in construction. So we're really open to going forward and hearing your feedback. And I see some chat items coming in too. Oh, we have 5 math people here. Yay. Any comments or responses or questions? Antonio wants to be a math people too.
You are more than welcome, Antonio. Thank you so much, everybody who attended. And thank you so much for putting this all together, Riyadh, and everybody who presented. We appreciate all of you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
You're welcome, and thanks for having us. And if anyone has any kind of like delayed thoughts or follow-ups, feel free to contact any of us. I know it's late on a Thursday afternoon, so we'll let everyone go. Thanks for listening to us.